The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Episode 3, recap. Spoiler full recap. And yeah, this episode was much, much, much fun. Action. And a lot of cameos. If you can call them cameos. We kind of knew some characters would show up. There was another one we didn't know would show up. But the connecting of things continues. We even get a lot of like subtle Easter eggs. So let's talk about it. First things first. Just the way the episode opens is a little different than usual. We get a little look at what the political campaigning aspect of things would be for this GCP. Is it the global or GRP Global Reintegration Restoration? I already forget what it's called. Fucking great. Reunification? Fuck. But just basically this movement, this program for reintegrating all of the snapped away people back into society. Again, this is that cornerstone of the MCU. This is that very political, sociological, thriller, earthbound conflict corner of the MCU. These are the kind of things that they tackle. A lot of relevant social issues, a lot of relevant questions and themes of America too, of American society and policies and all of that. And it's as close to what we actually experience in this country as it's going to get. Of course, then we get into all the super stuff that is not very realistic, but it doesn't. It basically just saying that it is as realistic as it's gonna get. Well, I can't believe that I'm gonna get a siren through here at 11:37. You would think it'd be the best time to maybe not get one this week. I must get one every episode, right? The late one's gonna get one. The late one's gonna get one. It's not that they don't come through at night, because they do. I mean, it's very rare that I've been woken up out of a sleep from it, but they come through. Wow, it's almost as he knew I needed him to be quiet about it, huh? He's kind of quieting it down a little bit. So yeah, I just think it's important. I think this show touches on a lot of important things. This episode was, I suppose, the first episode so far that doesn't blatantly touch on the social status of African Americans in this country, but still has subtle hints to it. It's an important element. I think, yeah. So I mean, Sam really he does touch on Wakanda a little bit, and the mention of Wakanda early on in the episode was purposeful, I think, to what happens at the end of the episode with the kind of big cameo moment thing. Again, don't forget spoilers. I will talk about that in a second. But I think also John Walker kind of not being as much in the episode was almost kind of a good decision on the part of the writing to kind of not feel like we're going to get fucking overwhelmed or oversaturated with this new Captain America that we don't know and are either a little bit or a lot of it annoyed with, right? So we need to spend legitimate time with our protagonists. I like how we are it's a lot more about the mission this episode. Like I said last week, if it's a long movie, this is Act 2, and now we're going to get into some more conflict, some more action, which they did. There was more action, and just kind of moving the story forward. A lot of basic character development was a little bit more pushed to the side here. We have little moments where I think Sam and Bucky's relationship is continuing to grow in a certain direction. Those little moments are super important. Like when Bucky tells Sam that you risked your life for me once with Steve. You helped me out. I'm asking you to do it again. That's a powerful little moment. And then the fact that they talk about that shield again in that kind of was the biggest character development moment for me. The fact that Sam says, I shouldn't have put that shield in a museum. I should have destroyed it. It just shows his regression in this regard, that he doesn't think that he should be Captain America, or he doesn't think that America is ready for him to be Captain America. He doesn't feel wanted, and why should he? He hasn't been. He hasn't been wanted at all. And that alone touches on this idea of being black in America. So I mean, that moment was that was the most powerful little moment, because and Bucky says, I swear to God, that shield means so much to me that I'm gonna take it from this guy. If you're not gonna accept the mantle, I'm gonna take it. So there's always been this question in this series. It's clear who Steve wanted to be next. He wanted Sam to take this over. At the end of Endgame, that was the point, but immediately the debate began between fans and everybody about it. Well, Bucky Barnes was Captain America in the comics at one point. Could this series explore the idea of Sam literally declining to take the mantle and Bucky taking it on himself? That line really hints at that possibility even more than ever before. I don't think it'll happen, but it could. You never know. So in terms of story, I think this little story, plot development and character development, those were the two very important moments. But we also need the villains to be humanized for us. The fact that these villains are who they are immediately just shows the twists and turns are coming. For instance, in this episode, we get to see Zemo again for the first time since Civil War, right? He even wears his comic-accurate costume in this. He's even got quite a comedic side that we didn't know. Turns out he's rich. Turns out he's a baron. Turns out these are things that happen in the comics too, but if you didn't read the comics, you wouldn't know. He's very interesting, complex, and well fleshed out character that you just know by his little actions. He's just from the way he was in Civil War and how he is in this. He's a guy who's very meticulous, very strategic. He's playing his own game, and he's playing the long game if he has to. This is a guy who is definitely probably our villain, our main villain. It was good to get to know him more in this episode. It was interesting to have him actually team up with our heroes. But more than that, to see the way he responds to things, his motivations, his whole grudge against super soldiers and anybody with superpowers because of his grudge against the Avengers, just shows that we're going to have a flip-flop situation. And that's what we get a scene, humanizing our so-called villains, and also presenting conflict for them, where they're further humanized. Carly and her posse are further humanized as we get to learn more about Carly and her situation and her family, and why this personally affects her, this whole state of the world after the blip. But then also seeing how she does something kind of bordering the line of bad, right? She blows that place up and kills people, right? And that kind of gives us the double-edged sword of her character and her group that she's leading. They are bad in some sense that will go to extreme lengths to do things and get what they want, but at the same time their motivation behind it all and why they're doing it is relatable and understandable, and it humanizes them a shit ton. I think it first of all poses the question of, can Carly potentially corrupt herself? Yes, but it also poses the question of who's the real villain of this series. The fact that they were teamed up with the guy who's probably the real villain, and they're hunting the people who are not as bad, just tells me that it's going to be like Falk and Buck will be somewhat switching. They'll see the Flag Smashers as people they should actually probably maybe be working with or helping in some way at some point in this, and that Zemo, being who he is, will probably be hunting them down because he has this grudge against people with any kind of ability such as this. that just shows the switch we'll probably get, where all of a sudden Zemo's the big villain, and they're going to be fighting him. Seeing him in his comic accurate costume was awesome. But then we got to talk about Sharon Carter's return. Sharon is definitely in a different state than she was. She's even holding a grudge against the idea of being a hero or a superhero and what it means. The hypocrisy of it was brought up. I think this is very interesting because this is not something deeply explored before. So that was interesting to have it come from her, too, someone who consistently stuck her neck out for people like Steve, and in return got screwed over because of it. It just makes sense that she'd be in a different state. And we see her at the end. At the last time we see her in this episode too, she's talking to someone we don't know, and it just tells us maybe her allegiances are not entirely trustworthy. What is her motivation, her goal here? I'm also not 100% sure. Was she the one helping them out, sniping people, or was it our cameo at the end who was sniping people? I think it was probably her in that moment, but could have been either of them. That was one thing I was a little confused about when I saw the end. But I just gotta say that Sharon having her character grow and seeing it clearly is very important, because she has potential to continue to grow in this entire arc, this entire large narrative. So having her here kind of more conflicted than she's ever been, dealing with serious problems, being literally unable to return to her home country, is all very relatable things that we can really understand and really like care about with her character. But we will learn more what's going on, and she just kicks ass. Let's just real quick break that down. She kicks some butt, and we get a long sequence of her just beating people up, and it's very reminiscent of Natasha Romanoff. Like, she could be an event. She's like someone who slipped through the cracks in the Infinity Saga. That could have been an Avenger. I mean, let's just be real. There's potential for her character going forward. I'm just curious what we'll learn about what she's been up to and how she really feels, possibly, as this series goes on. We have not seen the last of her. Definitely not. And then we get another little hint of a even larger villain. Someone maybe either that... It's hard for me to fully believe Zemo being an ally the whole time. I just can't believe it. If they take that approach, it would shock me. Because he's always kind of someone who's looking out for himself and only himself, really, at this point. In the comics, I think he's if I'm not mistaken, he goes on to actually create a team of villains to oppose the Avengers. Makes sense considering his motivation in the MCU so far, too. That would be really cool to see. But at this point, he is not 100% the villain yet, and they introduced another villain hinting at another villain called Power Broker. In the comics, it's a character, not 100% brushed up on who Power Broker is from the comics, but I know that he or she, depending on who, is an important presence in the story of Falcon and Winter Soldier in the comics, and now clearly in the MCU. So we get to learn a little more about who's behind some things here, without really knowing too much yet. But we'll see who exactly it is and what's going on here as the series progresses. Other than that, we learn more about how the Super Soldier Serum even exists at this point, and it ties right into Civil War and continuing the arc of that whole thing. And then there's just a whole bunch of action that's fun. There's a lot of funny moments too. And I can't wait to see what happens next, man. And real quick, we'll talk about that cameo at the end. I mean, you gotta keep the connectivity for it to... I mean, it's just great. I really just didn't even know what to... Nobody could see that coming, but we have a Wakandan show up. It's one of the commanding officers in the Royal Guard, and we've seen her before. She was in Civil War. I don't recall if she shows back up in Black Panther, but she was T'Challa's one of T'Challa's main bodyguards in Civil War. It's the same character. I completely blanking on her name. I don't even remember if we got her name when we first met her. But we will learn more about her now. And she's there with one intention. I'm here for Zemo, is what she says right before we cut to the credits. Having a Wakandan connection is great, but also having a Wakandan in general show up to provide another character's presence and another element to the series. Who the hell knows what's going to happen in that next episode? But we have 3 left. We've reached the midpoint, and it felt like a midpoint and a turning point kind of moment. So halfway through with 3 episodes left, let's see what happens next week. That is my recap.